Hello and welcome to my reading of my book, As Mother Lay Dying. My name is Antonia Rolls and I'm going to be reading this chapter by chapter on this channel so you can have as much or as little of it as you want. My mother was given 6 weeks to live in 2015 quite suddenly with a diagnosis of pancreatic cancer. I shut down my life in an afternoon and moved in to be with her, to walk as far as I could with her for this final journey, both knowing that she would have to do the last bit on her own. The book of this time, the waiting and watching and witnessing, is now finished. I've called it As Mother Lay Dying, and it's in the form of a memoir. Part 1, the dying, accompanies my mother as she faces day by day the end of her life. Part 2, the bereavement, talks of the strange emptiness after the wake and the funeral are done, and my mother's house is silent. Part 3, the recovery, I talk about grief and the many ways it manifests, and for this part I draw on my own observations and stories and experiences of working with people at the end of life over the last 10 years in the community. So, let's go. As Mother Lay Dying by Antonia Rolls, Part 1, The Dying, Chapter 1. Last week there was no diagnosis. This week there is a terminal pancreatic cancer, and I have been uncharacteristically swift and efficient. I have sorted out my own house and moved into my mother's house with just a small suitcase until I am no longer needed here. I am waiting in a chair at the end of my mother's bed so that we can see each other when she wakes. The big, comfortable chair that I put next to her bed can't be seen if she's sitting up. She would be looking ahead in that case and talking to a disembodied voice behind her. I will leave that first chair, the big, comfortable one, till later when she's near to death and won't know where I am sitting, only that I am somewhere near her. At least, that is what I intend. There were times when her face fell into itself today. Her mouth drooped and her chin dropped. When she is feeling able, she is in control and very present. When she drifts off to sleep, which she does all the time, her energy is gone and the power is diminished. Her small frame is vacated. Her face is pale. Her mouth is dry and uncomfortable, and her stomach hurts. Mum's face is soft to kiss and hot and smooth. I smell bad, she says, but I tell her she doesn't smell bad. Not at all. It is just that she needs to use the loo so much and can't keep any food down. I think she feels smelly, but really she isn't. Mother is fragrant. Since word of her illness has spread, she has been inundated with beautiful scented soaps and creams. She washes in the most wonderful rose-scented, honey extract, vanilla-infused bath oils, and she is truly fragrant. I am sitting in one of her lovely little Regency chairs at the end of her bed downstairs in her dining room. Mother's home sits high up above the Sussex Downs with a conservatory overlooking the shimmings below, the green and gentle countryside of the shimmings stretching out for miles just beyond her front door. Mum likes to sit at her breakfast table in the conservatory, watching the tiny horses in the fields and copses miles away, and the clouds and the sky moving and changing over the landscape. She likes to spend time in her little table, by the window there, looking out over it all and feeling peaceful. I am here in her house to look after her while she dies. I have moved in for as long as it takes. I am learning how this experience of dying is different from others that I have witnessed. I'm still not the one doing the dying. I am not medically trained, and I don't know about the drugs that can help her symptoms. I'm not a stranger coming in to offer my little piece of time and love. I am my mother's daughter. I am my brother's sister and my children's mother. I belong to the people directly concerned with this dying person. I am in the middle of it, and even if I walked away wanting to have nothing more to do with it, all this dying that Mum is doing is known and felt throughout my entire extended family. The whisper of it is in everybody's bones. She is the next one. It is her turn now. Each of the old aunts and uncles, each of the grandparents, each of my mother's siblings that have died have managed it. They faced it and got on with it. We all watched and visited those we could visit, and regretted and wondered about those we didn't visit, because they died quietly without anyone there, and we cried when they had gone. We wondered how they were doing it, those that we did see, and we all hoped that we didn't have to do it ourselves for a long, long time, if ever. We loved the aunts and uncles that have gone now, remembering how they had made our childhood magical. They were young and strong then, when we were children, my brothers, my cousins and me. My uncles would always know what to do. If I wanted lamb chops as a child for every meal, when staying with my grandparents in the old run-down terraced house in Franklin Road in Birmingham, they would know how to get them for me. If I wanted red woolen tights and a red ribbon in my hair, my uncles would take me out and get them for me, and I, at the age of 5, would think that they were the cleverest people on earth. At the end of my grandparents' bed was a freestanding, full-length, heavy wooden-framed mirror. Sitting on the floor in front of this mirror in my red tights and new dress, filled with excitement, I would watch as my aunts curled my hair with my grandma's little hairpins. My uncle would take the red ribbon from his pocket and let me hold it until my hair was curly enough for it to be tied around my head. It was perfect. In the days after my mother died, I took the mirror from my mother's bedroom and put it in my sitting room in my own house. It is a most precious piece of furniture, and if it is possible for a piece of furniture to hold happiness in its wooden frame, this mirror does just that. I watch my own grandchildren play in front of it now, and wonder at the passing of time. I'm told that the days go slowly, but the years go fast, and I think this is so. Immediately after they married, my mother and father took a cargo boat out to Nigeria in British West Africa, as it was then. After 3 months at sea, they arrived at the port in Lagos and were taken to Ado-Ekiti, from where their married life was to begin. My father was to teach for the voluntary services overseas, and my mother to set up a school clinic. My older brother Rafe was born in Ibadan, a long, fraught drive over difficult roads from Ado-Ekiti, so when it was time for my mother to have her next child, me, she flew back to her parents' house in Franklin Road in Birmingham. After my birth, there was talk of naming me Louise, after my grandmother, Louisa May, but it was feared that I would be called Lou, like my grandmother, and Lou Rolls would not have done me much good, so I was named Antonia Louise. After 3 months with my grandparents, I was taken back to Ado-Ekiti, where my mother told me I was given another name, Olabisi, a Yoruba name meaning joy increases. My older brother had been given the Yoruba name Ayodele, joy has come home. There are many memories of Nigeria in my mother's house now. She has a carved wooden tray and a wooden chopping board in her kitchen, and carved wooden tables and chairs in some of the rooms. There were Yoruba metal rings that my father said were used as money, which we as children compared to our coins and notes, but we played with them so often that they were broken, and I am sorry for that now. We left Africa for England when Nigeria gained independence, where we rented a little farmhouse near Oxford. My next brother, John, was born here, and 11 months later to the day, now living in Liverpool, my youngest brother Dominic was born. It is this youngest brother that went to Edinburgh 6 months after our mother died, in order to do his own dying. Being the only girl with 3 brothers, I had a privileged place in the family. I was not the oldest, nor the youngest, nor a boy. Being the only girl, I had longed for a sister, and when my mother went away to have her 4th baby, I had decided to call the new baby Julia. When my 3rd baby brother was brought home, I was not impressed and continued to call him Julia. We were all very envious of him, this new baby. He had problems with his eyes and had to wear plasters over each eye with a tiny plastic tube in each eye patch to keep the air circulating. My brothers and I wanted those plastic tubes and would remove the plasters from his eyes to take the tubes to play with. After a while, I forgot to call him Julia. My mother kept him safely away from us. He wore his eye patches and life went on. My mother had wanted a sweet and well-dressed little girl. What she got was a very determined fairy with straight white blonde hair that would not lie flat. I loved my mother. She was so very beautiful. Her hands were soft and kind, but though I was dressed in the prettiest of dresses, with white bows in my hair, I was never beautiful. There were so many things a fairy should do, creative, expressive things like wearing old net curtains and mixing purple cloths with yellow. It was hard for my mother to keep me looking pretty because I had very fixed ideas about how I should look and how fairies behaved. At my first school in Liverpool, I was chastised for covering the cloakrooms in purple crayon, but it looked a lot better when I had finished, and I had thought the teachers would be glad. I remember being told off and given a smack in front of the other children in the morning assembly, which shocked and humiliated me and came as a complete surprise. Perhaps, though, I had tested the school enough already by taking 2 or 3 little girls to the toilets during classes that week to wash their hair in the sinks to make them prettier. I did not see that any of this was a problem. It was this difficulty in following rules that gave my mother so much anxiety. My father thought that I was creative and that it should be nurtured. It was not that I rebelled, not that I wanted to make a point. It was simply that I didn't quite fit in and I didn't always understand the rules. My mother did understand the rules and had found them unkind. She had a husband she called eccentric, and now she had an only daughter who also found it hard to conform. My most favourite place in the world was with my grandmother in her house in Birmingham. When I arrived at her door, she would open her arms, bend low to hug me, and tell me that I was her darling in her lovely Irish voice, using Gaelic words mixed in with the English. She was old even when I first knew her, worn out with raising 7 out of her 8 children with very little money. But my brothers, all my cousins and I loved to be with her and my grandfather. She had no real time or understanding for aesthetic things. Life had been too hard for that. But she fried us chips for every meal and let us have sugar in our tea in glass teacups and saucers, and sang us Irish songs and didn't worry about bedtimes. And when we, my brothers and I, stayed with her and Grandad, many of my uncles and aunts lived nearby with their children, and we had access to our 20 cousins, whom we didn't see that often as we lived so far away. My brothers and I had 7 uncles and 7 aunts, and 24 first cousins in total. Many more second cousins, great aunts, great uncles, relatives once, twice removed, lived in Ireland, America, Canada, and all around the world. There were always people coming and going at my grandmother's house, and she would welcome them all. My parents had a car, my grandparents did not. Staying with them in Birmingham meant catching double-decker blue and cream buses. We sat at the front on the top when Grandma took us shopping with her, and I held her hand and loved the sweets that she would buy for us. We, my brothers and I, loved the freedom of being with her when out in the city, and would run off and explore before returning to Grandma, who never seemed worried. I became separated from my grandmother in a department store in Birmingham when I was about 5, ending up in the store manager's office with a policeman. They gave me cakes and fizzy drinks, so that when my poor grandmother eventually found me, I had no intention of ever leaving. I liked it in the store manager's office, and I liked the policeman especially. I have a memory of not leaving quietly. My mother and my aunts understood the importance of lovely things. They had pretty glass bottles in blues, greens and reds on the windowsill to catch the light. They loved good cloth, proper china, quality in all things, and beautiful, perfect jewellery. One of my aunts is a talented singer and actress. She loves the stage. It is this aunt that sat with Mother later as she lay dying, in between two worlds, no longer with us and not yet gone, whispering stories of their childhood together in Birmingham and Ireland. Another aunt had fancy wigs, false eyelashes and platform boots when I was a child. That made her a film star to me, and I was allowed to wear her wigs and boots when I visited her, which made me a film star too. This aunt was a gifted painter. Despite winning a scholarship to an art school as a young woman, my grandparents had refused to let her go because it was not Catholic. There was anger in her creativity after that. She was brilliant, funny, and extremely pretty, full of fire and quick comic wit. We all adored her. Everyone did. Her attitude to her creativity showed in episodes that confused me as a little girl. Behind the front door of one of the new high-rise flats in Birmingham, in which she lived in the 1960s, was a spare blank wall. On one of my visits, I saw that the wall had been covered in the most exquisite, imaginative, beautifully drawn and painted figures, illustrating the fairy tales that my aunt so loved. It was magical. It was perfect, intricate, sensitive, colourful and ambitious. The figures covered the entire wall. The next time I visited my aunt, the wall was white. When I asked where all the figures and princesses had gone, she told me that it hadn't been any good. She didn't like it, and she had painted it over and returned it to the spare blank wall it had been before. She wouldn't discuss it. That is when I saw anger in my aunt's creativity. I thought she was mad to destroy such beautiful work. She had removed it forever, despite my having been utterly enchanted with it and knowing how much I had loved it. I could not feel hurt, though. In my own way, without understanding her reasons, I knew I could not ask her too many questions. There was something about her anger in destroying her works that made me want to keep quiet. I knew, too, that she could do it all again. She was so talented that if she had wanted to, she could cover another wall, paint on another surface, create something new that was quite magical, but that I should never question her. I found a large, heart-shaped stone that she had covered in tiny, detailed flowers on a black background in her house after her death, and I took it as a memory of her. She did not destroy all the lovely things that she made, it seems. She has gone now, this angry, funny, pretty and brilliant aunt. A few days before she died, when she was in her 80s, I had to help her onto the loo with her walking frame. She was mortified and told me that I should never see her like this. She was tiny, too thin, fragile and weak. She was exquisitely dressed and made up, and as beautiful as she had always been, her eyes still alive with her quick wit and full of fury with her failing body and strength. A day later, alone in her flat, she lay down on her sofa in the afternoon and died. All that personality, all that fun, anger, love of good things, gone. My mother is going now. I am linked to my mother in a way that means that though I am watching her, part of me is dying too. My brothers are watching her and wondering how life will be without her holding us all together. I'm not thinking that. I am noting the way she looks when the pain hits her, watching how her legs are wasted when she tries to get out of bed, and how carefully she gets everyone to talk about themselves so that she does not have to talk about herself. I am looking for clues on how to die. I am waiting for her to talk about the past, to tell me her regrets, to do what I think dying people do, but so far she has not done any of it. She is peaceful, contained and content. I look at her eyes. They are yellow now, and she says her wee is yellow too. I want to ask her what she feels about it, but I don't. I think I will just keep watching, and she will tell me what she's doing by her actions, her expressions, and I will lock it away for when my time comes, and I have to do it too. I went upstairs this evening to see her and take up her morphine and her sleeping tablets for the night. We have a bed downstairs here in the sitting room, a hospital bed that has electrical controls to lift the top of it and the bottom of it up and down for comfort and to prevent bed sores. We have made it as nice as we can with white cotton sheets and a soft tartan blanket from her bed upstairs. Her pillows are covered with fine cotton pillowcases as the heavy, beautiful, white, lacy and embroidered pillowcases she loves hurt the skin on her face if she lies on her side. Though she is happy with and accepts the need for the setup with her hospital bed in the dining room downstairs, Mother loves her own bed upstairs in her bedroom. Somehow I get her up the stairs. It takes ages, and she frowns with concentration, step by step, to reach the top, where she gives a little laugh and a gasp of satisfaction. She can see her bed now, through the open bedroom door, and she knows she will get to it very soon. It is one of a pair of heavy antique Chinese lacquer beds, with delicately painted decorations and scenes of little Chinese figures in relief at the head and the foot. The other Chinese bed is in one of the other bedrooms. My brothers sleep on that bed when they stay. I have the double bed here in Mum's house. In the room painted green, as I have moved back in to look after her, and this is my home now, for a while. When my parents were together many years ago, these two ornate Chinese single beds were pushed together to make one big bed with a crease down the middle where they met. Mother inherited these beds from my great-grandmother, her grandmother-in-law. In fact, my great-grandmother died in the bed in which Mother is lying right now upstairs in her room. I remember being 4 years old and sitting on that big Chinese bed with my great-grandmother a week or so before her death. She was smiling and sitting up in one of her lovely apricot silk and white lace bed jackets. She had tight, steel grey curls in her hair, set close to her head, as though they were cut from pieces of felt and stuck onto her head with glue. She had horn-rimmed glasses with sparkles in the corners, and very kind eyes, I wanted to play with her shoes, but she was too ill and weak to get out of bed and join me. I remember her being a very nice lady, and there were tadpoles in the pond in her garden, which was even more exciting than her shoes. Tonight, when I went upstairs to bring Mum her morphine and sleeping tablets, she was lying on her side in her bed, with one leg out of the duvet, waving her foot at me in greeting and smiling. She told me she had been dreaming of her mother and her father and her sister, the aunt who lay down one afternoon on her sofa and died. Her father was reading the paper and asked her if she would like to read it too, but she told him no, not just yet. I asked her if she had many of these dreams. Oh yes, she said, all the time. As part of the tribe connected to this dying person, I wonder if these people she dreamt of that I knew and am connected to are part of the process of detachment, or whether they are the product of morphine. For the past few years, I've been sitting with the dying, learning how to be a companion for those at the end of life, learning how to be a soul midwife, a holistic, emotional and spiritual companion for the dying, learning how to offer a compassionate presence for the end of life, and all the time watching, observing, listening and seeing how the dying unfolds. The soul midwife in me says, yes, this is what happens, and she has just had a significant dream of her dead family coming to spend time with her. If I was sitting with someone I didn't know who was facing the very end of their life, on hearing this I may file it away in my mind that this person has begun the dying process, and this was a sign that they are getting ready to go. I may have accepted that this was all part of the journey and to be expected. But I know Mum, and she often has dreams of her family, and she has been complaining too much of morphine today and yesterday, making her feel trippy, she says. I am seeing this dying process from a different angle with Mum. It would be lovely if this was a real end-of-life dream, but I know her so well. She is so much here, so in control, so very much herself, that I am wondering if it is just a blip, and if she is to have significant dreams. They will be later on, when she is drifting in and out of consciousness, and I won't think it out of place. When do dying people have dreams or visions of journeys, or of people coming to get them? I know Mum so very well. She is too sane, too intelligent, too alive to be dreaming of dead relatives like this. I have never done any dying. I have no idea. Do they really dream of people coming to visit them? My daughter, Alexia, told me that when she began her first nursing job, on that first ward, an old lady was expected to die, and didn't. I could hear you all talking about me dying, she told Alexia, and I knew I wasn't going yet. My husband was at the foot of my bed telling me it wasn't time for me to go yet. Alexia knew that the husband was long dead, and asked the old lady if her husband often visited her. He visited her when she was ill, she said, and always told her that she would get better. It wasn't her time yet. During the latest visit in hospital, in Alexia's ward, when she was expected to die during Alexia's shift, the husband had been at the foot of her bed telling her not to listen to the nurses and doctors. She wasn't going to die yet. Not yet. And she didn't. The old lady didn't want to tell any of the staff in case they thought her mad, but she did tell Alexia, and Alexia didn't think she was mad. If your husband was there, she told the old lady, I believe you, and he was. I hope you enjoyed chapter 1. There are 20 chapters in all, and I will be recording each chapter individually, so that in the end the whole book will be on YouTube, one chapter at a time.